For those that are still trying to climb that mountain of financial success, what advice would you give them?
The first one, if possible, is go out and seek a mentor that is in that place. The second way is I always go back and just spend some time sitting and pondering. Yes, it's great to learn a principle, but now how to apply that principle, how to live that principle, is different from reading about the principle.
Welcome back to Intentional Movement. Hope you guys have been enjoying the episodes. Today we're going to do something a little bit different, but still in the frame of what we've been building here as far as community and also content. Today I have a mentor, friend, community leader, Ray Blom, here in San Bernardino, California. For those that don't know, I grew up here in San Bernardino, and Ray did too. But the difference is Ray decided to stay, plant some seeds, and watch them grow as he not only leads businesses here in San Bernardino, but also mentors individuals here as well too. So Ray, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited. Like you said, I was born here in San Bernardino, but I'm going to correct one thing you did say. My goal was to get out.
Oh, okay.
I left. I found success, and then I felt a calling come back, and I moved back to San Bernardino in 2005. Wow. So I've always been near it, but it was not to live in it, because we all know that San Bernardino's faced its challenges. But I felt a calling to come back since 2005, moved back, and then in 2020 decided to move all my organizations and businesses from Ontario here to San Bernardino as well.
I did not know that you actually had left. So where did you go when you left?
Well, I tried leaving multiple times. When me and my now wife were first together and we had our son, we moved to Phoenix.
Wow.
Prior to that, in sixth grade, I had moved to Oregon for a season with my family, ended up back with my mom when I was 17, moved to Phoenix when I was about 20, and then we ended up moving back. And then when I found success, ultimately we moved to the East Highlands area. My partner at the time was trying to get me to go to Rancho or Orange County type area where, when you find success, people move away from San Bernardino. Yeah. And at that time, I just kept being drawn back. So I bought property up at the northwest corner of San Bernardino, a nice area, so that I could be a part of the impact to change San Bernardino, but also say I chose to live in the city.
And that is definitely a choice, but you have definitely thrived here. I know myself growing up in San Bernardino, growing up on, the West End and then the North End and all the in-betweens and stuff, San Bernardino definitely has had its challenges. And a lot of times, a lot of people get swept underneath the energy of the city here. Mm-hmm. And so I know you've not only have the businesses here, but you're also a part of the organization that is the Church the Way, World Outreach out here, that you guys have been doing amazing things in those areas that I talked about that have been affected by the energy of the city as well too. So what are some of the things that when you first came back that you were like, you know what, I want to make this a priority to get my hands in and fix?
Well, it's funny. When I first moved back to San Bernardino, I didn't have a real plan. I was not a part of the Way World Outreach. I was in business. Like I said, my business is Rancho, Ontario area. I had multiple organizations that would come, even when I had my chain of schools, I never was able to open up in San Bernardino, either because of the economics or because of the real estate, the lack of opportunities here, or my partners were just against being a part of San Bernardino. So when I finally came back, it was in 2005. I didn't move my businesses back to 2020. I was still going to Rancho for my business life. And it was crazy because back then I fought when I was in networking event, they go, well, where do you live? And I would say things like Devore.
Yeah.
And then one day I just got, why are you moving back to San Bernardino if you're ashamed to say that's where you live? And so I finally started saying San Bernardino, and they'd look at me like I was crazy or why, or because they knew I had found a level of success. And I said, I choose to. And when I studied. I came back and I started studying. I had been involved in community, mainly youth. And when my kids were growing up, we were involved in soccer. And I was a youth probation officer for a while, and I did a lot with youth. Once my kids grew up and really got to a next level, I still was active in the president of a soccer league and club and mentoring young men in there. But I started studying and look, why is our city still broken? Why has, I was part of the chamber in Fontana, and I watched Fontana turn it around. I did events in Riverside, and I watched Riverside turn it around. But why is San Bernardino still struggling? And I just studied, and in the last few years, I believe I found my why. And it comes back to, both the spiritual side of it, but the physical side of it is a lack of leadership, a lack of true vision and leadership for our city. And there's been some people that have really cared about the city. They come in carrying there's something about the city that they don't leave the same way. And so still studying it, but that's what I've come up with so far. I've been able to moderate, because of my involvement in the community, multiple mayoral forums when people are running against each other, and or council forums, and the same questions that are always asked about vision and about why you want to run. And that it's a standard almost answer with real no vision. And here's what I say is, I tell people, you've got to know three things: where I want to get to, but more importantly, where am I starting from, and what do I have to work with? And so they talk about ideas, because I don't say they're real vision, because they're not written down and they're not clear. A biblical principle I live by is write down the vision, make it clear so those who read with it can run with it. A lot of it is not clear. So they have ideas, but they don't know where we're starting from. I say numbers and our story tell the truth. So you can talk about pie in the sky ideas till you're blue in the face, but if you don't know where you're at, the analogy I always use is, if you called me today and said, hey, Ray, can you help me figure out my phone doesn't work, my GPS isn't working, how do I get from where I'm at to Florida? Orlando, Florida, I want to go to Disney World with my family. The first question I'd ask you is, where are you starting from? Because if I don't know where you're starting from, I can't help you.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yep. So from the journey of you trying to escape out of San Bernardino and then continuously being called back, what are some of the mountains and the peaks that you had to go through to become the man that is able to speak to the community that has already been downtrodden?
Well, I would say the mountains and the peaks. Well, the first mountain that was always heavy on my mind was my kids, my family, and their safety. Obviously, that's why I wanted to get out. Yeah. Everybody talks about, let's get out of San Bernardino so we can find a safer city, one where we can raise a family, and one where we can do things and be a part of the community.
And I think that's one of the biggest things people always talk about when it comes to San Bernardino. I mean, even if you Google San Bernardino, some of the prompting questions going to come up is San Bernardino safe? What's the murder rate? What's the crime rate? All these things that come up. So it's a mountain to climb in itself.
It is. But here's what I say, and I love to travel. I've traveled more around the United States and around the world in the last 20 years. And first of all, every city has its bad parts. Some cities have more bad parts than others. And just like every city, San Bernardino has its bad parts, which unfortunately is quite a bit of the area of the city, but there's also some really good parts. The other thing I had to come to the conclusion of is that if I'm a criminal and I want to go steal and rob, do I want to go to a poor city, or do I want to go to the nicer cities that surround the poor city?
Of course, a nice city.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's what I know is, unless I want to get way far away, all the cities that touch San Bernardino are being affected by San Bernardino. So it's really a regional problem. And unfortunately, even that next level of leadership at the county level hasn't recognized, or maybe they have and they don't care about San Bernardino like I do. But here's what I'm saying. We're the county seat, and crime knows no city limits. So I'm sure if this is a hotbed for crime, and by the way, I've lived now 20 years in San Bernardino, we've never had a problem with crime. But I know many people that I know who live in Rancho, who live in Fontana, Rialto, Redlands, who have had problems with crime. So, it's all over, and there's no criminal that says, I can't go out of the city limits I live in to do the crime I'm going to do. Matter of fact, most of them prefer to go outside of the city so they can retreat back to their safe haven, if that makes sense.
Yep, definitely. So with what the work that you're doing now, is it mainly with business owners, or what are the other industries that you're involved in?
Like you alluded to, there's 3 levels that I do work through. First and foremost, I have to work through my businesses. I lead, because my 6-man, my commercial insurance brokerage, it focuses on employers and California challenges, because some of the challenges that employers face in California. So that's the one that most successful business that funds me, my family, and a lot of my charity work. We have a general contracting firm that I use to help train and rehabilitate people that want a career path in construction. And we operate that. And although it's a for-profit, we don't take anything out of it. My wife and I, it's there for the use to help build career paths and opportunities. And then the last one that I really lead is Cityway, which is the Community Economic Development Corporation. We started it in 2019. And it's grown. And that one takes a good portion of my leadership and my time there to operate that and build that. Then I'm very involved in our church. I'm on the board. And the church is a worldwide organization now. We have campuses in multiple states and multiple locations in California and then multiple countries now. And so I'm a part of that and the missions team and the economic development. Cityway is the economic development arm of the church. But I do still serve in ministries inside the church as well.
So as in this generation, as it stands, as entrepreneurs, we are continuously trying to build like the biggest building in the city or even in the world, trying to build our empires and stuff. The way that you're talking about your nonprofit work and giving back is in the same breath as you're talking with your business. Where do you find time to balance those out? Because you attack it with the same energy and focus as you do for the for-profit. How does that work?
Everything I do is ministry. And that's how I consider it, because what ministry is about loving God and loving people. And so whether it's at the church, at my nonprofit, or my for-profits, or just out in the community, it's all ministry in my mind. There is no separation of that. And so with that being said, I love, being able to plan. So I plan my time as much as I can and the goal of all my organizations is really the season of my life that I'm in is to mentor, disciple, and develop leaders. And it's really not about, I still challenge myself to learn and grow in things that I'm passionate about, but in other areas, it's to be able to pass on the vision and what I've learned and the plans to the next generation that'll take them farther than I have. And so in every organization, it's about mentoring others to be able to help them get to that place where someday they're the leaders of the day-to-day of those organizations, not me.
Has it always been in that pathway for you?
No, that wasn't always. There's always turning points in life, and you talked about peaks and valleys. Valleys are usually those turning points in our lives. When we go through a hard time or a difficult time, that's when we really start to reevaluate, why am I here? What's life all about? And here's what I know is that money doesn't solve the most important problem of life. I realized that young, and I've realized that many times since then, but we always need reminders of that. The example I give, when my first grandson was born, he contracted an atypical bacterial infection that had him on dialysis and on breathing tubes when he was a baby during Christmas. And at that moment, I would have given all my success, all my money, my properties, everything I had built just to make him well, and I couldn't fix it. And so many times since then, I've had to face that. The biggest challenge being in 2017, I was facing marital problems. I was facing health problems that were life-altering or life-ending with my brain and my vision. And that's one of those points, where I was healed by God in a foreign place. Doctors couldn't explain it. And at that point, it was a turning point for me that said, my life has to be more than just being about money. And while I love my family, I want to lead them to a place that I've never gotten to. And how can I lead somebody to a place I haven't gotten, where there's joy, peace, and fulfillment, and not just money?
Absolutely. So we hear that a lot, that money is not everything. And you have the testimony and the story to prove that. For those that are still trying to climb that mountain of that financial success or have already reached that peak, where they're feeling powerful within themselves, what advice would you give them? Because, pride comes before the fall, right? And you're feeling like you can do anything. You have the resources, you may have the time, but yet you still feel as if there's an emptiness or that you feel that you can do more. What advice would you give to someone in that place?
Well, I guess two things. The first one, if possible, is go out and seek a mentor that is in that place and has that realization. You'll know. Because the one that's in that place is going to be sitting you down and telling you the truth. The one that isn't in that place, they both have success, financial success. The one that isn't in that place, all they're going to want to talk about is their financial success and nothing else. They won't tell you, because every person that's found some level of success had very many peaks and valleys to get there. And the one that's been humbled by the process and has a bigger purpose in money is going to share the peaks and valleys.
True.
The one that hasn't been humbled is just going to share about how easy it is that they've had it and make money. It's all about the money, which it's a lie. That's number one. If you can find that mentor that's truthful, that's found success and will be open and a transparent book. The second way is I always go back and just spend some time sitting and pondering.
And I think the humbled have been humbled, because I think that's the margin between a good man and a great man, and understanding that the great man has gone through more battles. He's seen a lot more of life, and he wasn't just trying to add points to the board or trying to be perfect in every step, and has made wise mistakes in his process and is continuing not only to learn about himself, but also to seek guidance, reward, and also strength outside of himself.
Absolutely. Yeah. You hit the nail on the head, being humbled and outside of himself. And like I said, the mentor, number one. Number two is sitting with yourself. That's a hard place to be. If you're prior to 2017, I couldn't sit with myself. I always had to be busy. I didn't want to sit there, because when I sat there, now I look back, I know I was running from God's voice. I was running from deeper purpose, and I didn't even know it. I just didn't know how to sit and be still, right? And now sit with yourself and ask yourself some tough questions. If money and influence solved real problems, why is Hollywood having so many challenges? More now than ever, with everything that's happening and being exposed. When I teach, I often use Robin Williams as an example. I grew up watching Robin Williams, right? Man that made people laugh for a living, was rich, influential, a comedian, lived in one of the most beautiful places in the world just outside of Golden Gate Bridge in Marin, and took his own life when things got tough. That tells you there's got to be something more than money, influence, and laughter in front of people when it all comes down to it. So sitting and asking yourself those questions.
I think that's so powerful. I find myself nowadays, I call them my, I can't have lactose, so non-dairy ice cream, and sitting with my dog on Friday. So on the outside it looks boring, but it's it's the time to like reflect, be with my thoughts, talk to God, and really reflect over what is what's going on with not even just throughout the week, but also in my life and my next moves that need to be executed on. A couple of weeks ago, I visited the church, and what was the pastor's name that's
Vlad Suvacek.
Vlad Suvacek.
Yeah.
And he preached such a powerful message. He said the reason why things are happening in your life or things have been stolen or misplaced is because you either misplaced them or you left a window open for a thief to come and steal it.
Absolutely.
And so when you put yourself in that type of frame, now you can implement that to other areas of your life. Where are you leaving openings open, not only for people to speak negative to you or for you to be in environments that you shouldn't be in that don't feed your soul or your mind in a positive way, but also like where are you misplacing things that God has given you that is for you. And a lot of times you can be placing those things in people's hands that should have never been able to handle your blessings.
Yeah, absolutely. In those times when you sit down and have those discussions or ponder, you got to ask yourself some tough questions. Go deeper than the superficial of just, I love vision and goals for this life, but at some point you got to go, well, was I created or am I an accident? Who was I created by? And why did he create?
Yeah.
And you got to be able to have those tougher things and those questions. And then, for me, I know. And, my leader, Pastor Marco, is one of the most amazing. He's always said something. He's always said, your why is more important than your what. And I had to really think about that for many times. Your why you do something is more important than what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because I could be mentoring young men for selfish purposes, and it's still mentoring, and the world might give me accolades, but it's still for my own personal gain.
Absolutely.
It means nothing in helping build people for the eternal. But if I'm doing it because I love God and I love them, and I want to see them succeed in all areas of their life, which the most important area being who I am, who am I, who created me, and what's my purpose for this life. If I don't help them get there, then it's just for money. And we've already talked about that money doesn't solve the most important ills that we see right now plaguing society.
That's amazing. There was a book that I just finished reading. It's called To Be Fathered by God. And the author said what you said, but said it in a different way. He said, "Thank you, Lord, for what you meant when you met me." And I think a lot of people, when they hear that whole phrase of money isn't everything, money may not be everything or whatever, but it is so important. In the podcast that you're getting ready to launch, Business by the Book, right? You're marrying not only that idea, but also principles from the biblical stance as well, too. So can you give a little bit of behind the curtains of what that'll look like and some of the principles you'll be sharing as well, too?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, one of the things I've learned, and that's what I'm out to show the world, is that God's principles in the Bible, I want to just take it back a second, because understand when God made us and Jesus came, died for our sins to save us, both were the same purpose. God desires a relationship with us. It was never about a list of rules. The rules are there when you're a child. Think of your parents. Yeah. They love you, so they give you a list of rules so you don't kill yourself. You don't do damage to yourself. And they'll correct you and punish you until you learn how to do it. And that's the whole purpose, right? So the rules were there not that we were ever going to be able to keep them, but they were there to help protect us because he loves us. When we look at that, God created us to have a relationship with us, not religion. And what I often say is, yes, religion and Christianity, Christians claiming to love God and love people have done more damage than maybe any other religion out there because they haven't lived out their own beliefs. Because when they asked Jesus something, they say the religious leaders who ended up putting him on the cross, the church, asked him, they were trying to trip him up, and they said, what is the most important law, right? They were trying to trip him up so he would give them the wrong answer and they could finally have something to kill him for. And he took him back and he said, love the Lord God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. It's all about the relationship of loving God and loving people. So Business by the Book is going back to the relationship that God gave as a father. He wrote the most beautiful love book ever written in the Holy Bible. And what he left were principles for his children to follow that if we truly learn them and not through what other people have told us or religious leaders have misrepresented, and we truly learn them and apply them, they work whether you know God or not. Here's the crazy thing. Inside the church, I have a bunch of people that, and our church is a church where we're seeing people come off the streets that were former prostitutes and gang members. So there's in a moment, the heart change could happen, a relationship could start, but building trust and changing a person's habits take a lifetime. But inside the church, and many churches around, especially the Western Hemisphere, because in Africa it's a little different, but is that they say, I love God and, hallelujah, praise God. But outside of those walls, they never live out his principles in their jobs, in their businesses, and they don't find the success. But here's what's crazy. There's many successful leaders that don't follow God, that don't know him, don't read his word or anything, and they found amazing success for this life in this world with finances and influence because they've applied God's principles, but they don't know where they came from or the why.
Absolutely.
So Business by the Book is for twofold. One, to inspire the church to get out into the world and live your faith and find the success, because we should be the most successful people in the world, right? If we're living out God's principles and we love him and obey him, there's no reason we shouldn't be the most successful people in the world. But yet, it's also to ask successful people, do you know where that principle or that belief that you live by came from?
They'll say John Maxwell or Tony Robbins.
or they'll give a guru.
Yeah.
And if you trace the principle back, because it's to show them that it comes from God's word.
And that's very interesting. Like even I spend my time reading a lot of self-development books, a lot of religious books, psychology and stuff too. And recently I've been diving into the works of C.S. Lewis. And I'm like, hold on, this guy wrote this decades ago. This new speaker just said this last week and it has millions of views. But the speaker himself doesn't even know where the genesis of that
principle came from. Absolutely.
And so it is, like you said, the principles are being acted out, but without understanding where the source of it came from.
Absolutely. And yet, when somebody tries to introduce them to that source, they say, there's nothing good there.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. Why? A lot of them have been hurt through hypocritical leaders, parents that lived one thing on Sunday and then the other 6 days of the week lived all of hell, but then would act like something on Sunday that they weren't. That's going to turn off people. People want real, right? And so it's about being real. And That's why I say a true mentor is going to share the valleys more than the peaks.
Yeah.
Because guess where you learn? You don't learn on a peak. You learn in the valley. That's where you grow and learn.
I think we've come to even like a generation where someone will say, okay, Ray, you've had success. And I guess their excuse to themselves is, well, I'm not perfect like you. And they misuse that word perfect instead of resilient.
Yeah, absolutely.
And them not understanding the difference between being perfect and resilient, it trips them up because they'd rather want the result and not put in the effort.
Absolutely. They're looking for an excuse.
Yeah.
Any man or woman that says they're perfect, just have their spouse, their kids, or their whoever their close inner family is, mother, father, come in and share the truth.
It's funny. I always say this because I've, unfortunately for me, but it's, God's carried me out through this journey. My father died when I was 9. And I always tell people, you don't know your parents, not really, until someone dies or someone gets divorced. Then all you have to do is just focus on that one individual, and you'll see this person is just a person.
Yep.
Because when they're together, it's easy to kind of like hide things or shift perspectives and stuff. But when you just seeing a person act out, you'll see people are not perfect.
Absolutely. We're all looking for the perfect man or woman. And the reality is there was one that was perfect. His name is Jesus. The rest of us are all flawed. And more people get hurt by putting their faith in men or women or leaders or husbands or wives or children or parents. I say this all the time. If your mother and father who love you dearly, I'm not saying perfectly, none of them can, dearly, will let you down in this life, why would you think a pastor, a leader, a mentor, a police officer, or anybody else wouldn't let you down? So the key is don't put your faith in men. Now the question is, where do you put your faith in?
That's true. And there's a lot of areas for them to sedate in and move around. A lot of people would rather, instead of accept that not everybody is perfect aspect, just move on to the next environment, the next purpose.
Looking for the next one to be perfect, the next one to be perfect.
And all it is just a person that is just better at hiding their imperfections.
Until you get close.
Until you get close.
Until you get close. And then you start to see, oh my goodness, it's the same. And what you're really looking for, here's honest. Be honest about yourself.
Yeah.
How can I expect something from somebody I can't live? Can you live a perfect life?
And that's the thing. There was this story, I know you've probably heard of it. It was Joyce Myers or somebody had just telling this story, or even Joel, one of them were telling a story about a woman going into a grocery store. And then she said she's looking for a man at this level 1. And so I'll tell the story from the beginning. So everybody
I love it. Yeah.
Okay, so woman goes into a store, and it's the husband store, right? And she says on the first level, I'm going to paraphrase, right? So she's going to the first level and says, okay, this is a man that has a job, working job, or whatever. He's home at 5, okay. And then on the next level, there's the men that, okay, he has a business and he's successful, whatever, but he's out of shape, okay? And then you go to the third level, okay, business, successful, 6-pack, has a yacht, right? And then goes to the next level and so on. Every level she goes upon or whatever, the level gets better and better until she reaches, I think it's like the 10th floor. And then the overhead says, you've reached the 10th floor. There are no men at this level. You're just proof that nobody is perfect and you've been looking for perfectionism.
And you're going to keep looking for the next one.
The next one.
And the next one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it goes back to you having to deal with who you are inside and then being able to accept that aspect of life.
Absolutely. If I have to be that husband, that father, that leader that people need, and how do I get there? How do I learn that? And that's where I say, in life, in business, the principles and where they come from is the Holy Bible.
It's so interesting. I'm going through my whole renaissance of who I am. And, even especially in multiple areas. And one of the areas is relationships, right? And I'm at a restaurant with a couple of my friends, and it's dinner time, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go to the restroom. I'm gonna come back. I go to the restroom, and there's this woman there, and she knows one of my mutual friends, and she says, "Oh, your friend Joe said that he wanted to introduce us." I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" Blah blah blah. And he says, I told him that I have a friend for you. And and he said, no, Rasheed's on his journey. He's focusing on himself right now. So she begins to talk to me and she says, yeah, I've been single for 4 years. I've been on my own journey and, healing. And I think I'm finally ready to get back out there. And right before we're about to go back out to where the seating area is, she pulls me aside and she said, do you see that man right there? She says to me, that's the guy I'm on a date with right now. She looks at me and she says, do you think I can trust him? And the only thing that I could say to her is, can you trust yourself?
That's good.
And she just looked at me and she was like, I think I can. And she just walks away.
Well, her asking you something already kind of gave the answer.
Yep.
She's learning.
Yep.
Has anything changed? And in order for it to change out there, it had to have changed inside.
Exactly.
Am I still lowering my standards for that next guy?
Absolutely.
There's so many things going on with relationships. And here's what I say. Where do we learn how to do relationships right? I didn't grow up with parents that taught me how to do it. They divorced by the time I was 7. So that wasn't a great place. My friends, well, many of them are in prison, dead, or still living at home with their parents. Who knows what happened? So my friends weren't a great place. Me and my wife got married, and by God's grace, we're married 33 years later. And it wasn't through her that I was able to learn relationships. My kids, I gave them what I learned that was better than what I had, but it still wasn't great. But where do you go?
Yeah.
You can't go to yourself if you're broken. So where do you go if not God?
Absolutely. And I think there's so many different sayings and things that are out there now, but yet people can be in relationships with other things and people for years and decades and not actually have true happiness. They're just there because they feel as if they're either stuck or they're waiting for that person to change.
Yeah.
There's some principles in that too. There's some principles to be learned.
Absolutely. And going back to, when you can have a peace and a contentment, and I'm not going to say happiness, but a peace and a contentment, or what I like to say joy, in the valley, in your health crisis, in things that are out of your control, that's when you know that you have a faith in somebody besides yourself or the people around you. And for me, it's Christ. I also have to, it's great to say I love God, but if you're a loving Father, you have to have given a roadmap or principles in writing for people to follow, your children, right? And again, business by the book. You could say life by the book. You could do marriage by the book. You could do a whole series, but for me, it's business by the book, right? And being able to teach people that principles work. And man, you just think about it. And I encourage journaling, and I journal.
Yeah.
And someday I hope that my journals go on to my sons. I have 2 sons, and now I have 5 grandsons and a granddaughter. Why? Because not only do I want to pass on my faith in God and the Bible, but I also want to pass on my experiences, because that's what mentorship's about. Yes, it's great to learn a principle, but now how to apply that principle, how to live that principle, is different from reading about the principle. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Again, I go back to my leader, Pastor Marco. He says you got to learn it, you got to live it, and you got to teach it before it truly becomes who you are.
Absolutely. Well, Ray, thank you for that. If you guys want to hear more principles, Business by the Book will be launched pretty soon. And you'll be able to just gaze at all the different principles. And for his grandchildren, as they grow up, they'll be able to watch you and hear you too.
There you go. Can I say one last thing?
Definitely.
And then what I want to encourage is that for everybody out there, is that as we launch this Business by the Book, I'd love you to be able to connect with us. And like I said, I'm not going to talk about religion. What I am going to talk about is relationships. And I believe that deep down, each of us desire successful relationships. The question is, where do we learn it? And here's what I say about even business.
Yeah.
Business, and it's great, the mail order and AI, those are all great things, and drop shipping, they're all great things. Yeah. But it's still going to come back to people and relationships. And so here's what I say as we go through the journey of Business by the Book, you can take the principles, you can apply them. These are successful principles that anybody in the world that's found success has applied these level of principles. But more importantly, it'll help bring success in areas that money can't buy.
Absolutely.
And that's where I'm most excited about. So I hope you'll join us, and I thank you, Rasheed, for having me as a guest on this show today.
Definitely. All right, until next time, see you guys real soon, and keep making intentional movements.